I know, the world rarely slows down. You probably just stumbled on this video by chance, and there are 100 reasons to keep scrolling. So, if you're still here, even for just a few seconds, I'm truly grateful. I'm telling this story not to complain, but as someone who once stayed silent for too long and finally found the words. Maybe, just maybe, somewhere in this story, you'll feel a quiet reminder that you're not alone. And if that happens, if even a small part of this speaks to you, a soft tap on the like button would mean more than you know. Just so I know, someone's still listening. I sat near the end of the long mahogany table, right between the dusty window pane and the grandfather clock that hadn't ticked in years. The will reading was exactly the kind of ceremony my father would have hated. Formal, stiff, surrounded by people who only showed up when his name meant money. My stepmother, Lorraine, was seated at the head, wearing pearl earrings and that same navy suit she wore to his funeral. Polished, poised, like she was auditioning for the role of grieving widow. Her son, Damien, was beside her, smirking into his untouched glass of water. The lawyer, Mr. Ellery, cleared his throat. "To my beloved wife, Lorraine Whitaker," he began. "I leave the family home on Ashton Ridge, the entirety of my savings and retirement portfolio, and full ownership of Whitaker Engineering Group." The words echoed across the room like stones dropping in a still lake. I blinked, slowly. No mention of me. Not my name, not even daughter. Just absence. A vacuum in the middle of my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I simply stared at the dust particles dancing in the afternoon light. My hands folded tightly in my lap. My father's legacy was being handed to the woman who once told me to call her Lorraine, not Mom. And I just sat there, quiet. Behind me, someone whispered, "Did she get anything?" Another voice, "Is she even his real kid?" And Lorraine didn't look at me, not once. I studied the wood grain on the table instead. The dark knots reminded me of tree rings, of time preserved, even when cut down. I counted 6 of them before Mr. Ellery cleared his throat again. "There is one more item," he said, reaching into his briefcase. That's when she turned. Lorraine's smile stiffened. Her hands, which had been folded elegantly over her purse, shifted slightly, as if preparing for impact. Damien looked up from his phone. Mr. Ellery produced a second envelope, smaller, older-looking. The kind with yellowing edges and a wax seal that had half flaked off. "This," he said carefully, "was to be opened only in your presence, Miss Whitaker." My stomach dropped. Me? For a moment, the room didn't move. Not a cough, not a rustle. Even the broken clock seemed to pause. Lorraine's knuckles whitened against her purse strap. Damien frowned. Mr. Ellery turned to me. "Would you like to step into a private room, Miss Whitaker?" I didn't answer. I stood slowly, chair legs scraping the hardwood floor. I reached for the envelope. It felt oddly warm, like it had been held, maybe even protected. I met Lorraine's eyes. She looked afraid, not angry, afraid. I tucked the envelope under my arm and followed Mr. Ellery out of the room without a word. As the door closed behind us, the whispers resumed. Louder now, but I didn't care. My pulse was steady. My silence was not surrender. It was something else. Something sharp. Something rising. I didn't open the envelope right away. Mr. Ellery offered a private office down the hall, but I told him I needed a minute. I wandered instead, down the corridor of the old estate house, past faded portraits and untouched furniture that smelled like dust and rosewood. This house was never mine, not even when I lived in it. Lorraine moved in when I was 11. She brought with her a piano we weren't allowed to touch, new rules that shifted like quicksand, and a son who once locked me out of the house during a thunderstorm just because he could. My father called it blending families. I called it watching your place at the dinner table slowly disappear. I remember one year, I made him a painting for his birthday. Acrylic, messy, but bright. It was of the river where we used to fish. He smiled when I gave it to him, said it was unexpected. The next morning, it was gone. Lorraine claimed it got wet and had to be tossed. But I found it later, torn and folded behind the basement boiler. She said it wasn't appropriate for display. Damien, on the other hand, gave him a tie. Just a tie. Dad wore it for weeks. By the time I was 16, I stopped trying. I learned to shrink, to fade into my own world of books and silence. I became the girl who kept her voice soft, her homework perfect, and her presence minimal. It was safer that way, and still, small things stayed with me. Like the time my father forgot to come to my debate championship, but somehow found time to attend Damien's junior varsity soccer match. Or how Lorraine used to, accidentally, throw out my lunch from the fridge, saying, "Oh, was that yours? It didn't have a label?" There were bigger things, too. The day she canceled my college tour visit behind my back and told Dad I had changed my mind. The birthday party that got moved to a week later. So it wouldn't interfere with Damien's exam week. It wasn't abuse. It wasn't violence. It was erasure, in tiny surgical cuts. And now, sitting in the back garden with that envelope in my hand, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was just done. The envelope trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside, a single sheet of thick paper. My father's handwriting, unmistakably his, clean, tight cursive with a downward slant at the tail of every Y. If you're reading this, then Lorraine got what she wanted, but it's not all she thinks. You were always quiet, but you listened. You saw more than I gave you credit for. There's something I've kept. For you. Go to the old workshop. Use the key. You'll know what to look for. It was unsigned. No closing. No love, Dad. But somehow, that made it feel more real. The workshop. I hadn't been there in 10 years. It used to be our project place, back before Lorraine. We built a model wind turbine together when I was 9. It never worked, but I kept the blueprints anyway, somewhere in the back of a drawer. My hand tightened around the letter. He hadn't forgotten me. He'd just hidden something. And now, maybe I was about to find out why. The old workshop stood at the edge of the property, past the withered garden beds and the row of cypress trees that never seemed to grow straight. It had once been my favorite place, a square room with wide windows and shelves of tools that smelled like oil and cedar. My childhood lived in those corners, sealed in forgotten jars and dusty wooden drawers. I hadn't stepped inside since I was 17. That was the day Lorraine changed the locks. I remember standing outside that door, trembling with my father's old key in my hand, jamming it into the lock again and again. Nothing. She'd watched from the kitchen window, sipping tea. When I confronted him, he mumbled something about security and too many spare keys floating around. I never tried again. Now, with the key from the envelope clutched in my palm, I walked slowly toward the door. The gravel shifted under my boots. The cypress branches swayed gently, but the wind was sharp, like it remembered everything. The key turned smoothly. Inside, the space was untouched. Dust clung to every surface, but nothing was missing. The workbench was still stacked with broken circuitry and an old soldering iron. On the wall hung the cracked clock I once tried to fix with Dad. It had stopped at 4:16. I walked around slowly, touching things with the tips of my fingers, afraid they'd shatter. And then, I noticed something strange. A stack of mail, unopened, tied with string and tucked behind a row of screw boxes. Letters, addressed to me. From my college, from scholarship foundations, even from Aunt Miriam, who I hadn't heard from in over a decade. All of them dated from the year after I left for school. My throat tightened. I never got these. Not a single one. And at the bottom of the stack, a birthday card. My 19th. From Dad. Proud of you always. Sorry I couldn't say it in person. It had been opened. The handwriting looked rushed, like he'd written it while someone was watching. Why would he write this if I wasn't even meant to see it? I sat down heavily on the old stool by the bench, my heart pounding. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a daughter and become a threat. But to what? I turned the card over again and again in my hands until I heard the faintest creak. I wasn't alone. The workshop window had cracked slightly open, and beyond it, a voice, low and raspy. "Oh, she finally came back," said the voice. I turned, startled. It was Gus, the old gardener. He stood leaning against the fence, arms folded over his faded flannel shirt. "I wondered when you'd show up," he said, his tone unreadable. "You knew about this place?" I asked. He nodded. "Your dad asked me to check on it every now and then. Make sure Lorraine didn't get curious." "Why?" Gus looked at me for a long moment. "Because he didn't trust her. Not with this. Not with you." My breath caught. "What else did he ask you to do?" Gus took a step forward. "He said if anything happened to him and you came back asking questions, I was to give you this." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a flash drive wrapped in wax paper. "It's time you saw the rest," he said. I held the flash drive in my palm like it was ticking. It felt strange to be handed something that might change everything by someone who used to hand me apples from the tree out back. Gus didn't say another word. He just nodded once, then turned and disappeared behind the garden fence like he was never there. Inside the workshop, I brushed dust off the old laptop Dad and I used to use for our experiments. Miraculously, it still powered on, groaning through the boot-up like an old man waking from a nap. The flash drive clicked into place. One folder. "To my daughter, if you're finally reading this." My breath caught. Inside were several documents, a few spreadsheets, and a video file. I opened the video. The screen blinked to life, showing my father in his workshop, seated at the same workbench I was at now. His face looked older, paler. The corners of his eyes lined deeper than I remembered. He cleared his throat. "If you're watching this, then the first will has already been read, and Lorraine has done what I feared she would." He looked straight at the camera. "I need you to know something. None of this was an accident." The room fell quiet around me. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. "She pressured me into changing the public will. Said it was for appearances. That Damien needed to feel secure. That splitting assets would cause tension. I told her I'd draft a private version, but she didn't think I would. I made this recording and left this flash drive in case she got to the lawyer first. She did." He paused, swallowing hard. "You were never out of my thoughts. Not for one day. I knew what was happening. The letters that never reached you. The visits canceled without your knowledge. You weren't forgotten, sweetheart. You were cut out. Carefully. Intentionally." I blinked. My hands trembled on the mousepad. "Everything you and I ever worked on, the annex, the designs, the early-stage patents, I put them under a holding trust. Your name is on every single document. The lab you dreamed of building? It's yours now. The access codes are in the document folder." He looked away for a moment, then back. "I couldn't protect you from everything. I should have done more. I was weak when it counted. But I want you to know, I saw you. All those years. Your notebooks, your projects, your quiet brilliance. I was proud of you." A long silence. "Don't let them make you feel small. Not anymore." And then, softly, "You don't need to earn anything. It's already yours." The screen went black. I sat there for what felt like a century. Then I opened the folder. Everything was there. Proof of ownership, registration codes for the research annex outside Westbridge, the master key code, and a document transferring intellectual property rights to Clara Whitaker. Me. He trusted me. Not because I demanded it, not because I played the game, but because he saw something in me they never bothered to look for. And now, it was time to go back. Not to plead, not to explain, but to take what was already mine. I didn't call ahead. I didn't send an email. I just drove. 3 hours out of the city, through the winding hill roads where the radio cuts out, and all that's left is the hum of tires and your own thoughts. The annex was nestled on the edge of a wooded property line, a place I remembered only in sketches, plans, and the hopeful blueprints Dad used to draw late at night. He called it our someday project. Now it was mine. The gate recognized the access code immediately. The metal arms slid open with a mechanical sigh. I drove in slowly, gravel crunching beneath the tires, eyes scanning the structure ahead. It was real. Concrete, steel, tall glass panels, not just a dream. This was where his faith lived. Quiet, sturdy, unfinished, like he knew I'd complete it. I stepped out of the car. Wind rushed past, tugging at my coat. The trees swayed with a kind of reverence. I walked toward the entrance. There was no lock. Just a fingerprint scanner and a keypad. I held my breath and tried the code. A green light blinked. Welcome, Clara. The door slid open with a gentle hiss. The air inside was cooler and still, like a breath held too long. I stepped into a wide, open atrium, and sunlight filtered in through high windows. The space smelled like new wood and fresh paint, tinged with the metallic scent of electronics waiting to be used. Every inch of this place was built with intention, for research, for development, for the curious. There were tables lined with untouched equipment, storage cabinets neatly labeled, and a server unit humming quietly in the back corner. On the wall, a plaque, brushed steel. The Whitaker Annex for Independent Science and Innovation. Below it, dedicated to C. Whitaker, for seeing beyond what is visible. My hand rose to my mouth. I wasn't sure if I was laughing or crying. I didn't cry at the will reading. Not when Lorraine took everything. Not when Dad's name was buried under lies. But here, in this quiet, glass-lit room that he built with my name etched in steel, I cracked. I walked further in. There was a private office in the back, small and bare, with a single desk. On top of it sat a wooden box. Familiar, old. My old childhood science fair kit, the one I thought was thrown away. Its lid was scratched, but intact. Inside, the same little notebook I used when I was 10. The pages were yellowed, corners bent, but each messy diagram was still there. Solar cells, bee communication, sketchy inventions. He kept it. The door behind me opened. I turned, tense, but it was only Gus. He stood silently in the doorway, holding a thick envelope. "I figured you'd be here," he said. He handed it to me. "What's this?" I asked. "Original building permits, ownership files, and a notarized letter. Your dad said if you made it here, it meant you were ready to take over." I nodded slowly. "I won't ask what you'll do next," he said. "But whatever it is, make it yours." And with that, he left. I sat in the office chair, turning slowly, eyes wide open. I didn't come here to prove anything. I came here because I finally had the key, and the silence, at last, belonged to me. The next morning, I met with Mr. Ellery in the office at the annex, a glass-walled meeting room filled with morning light and the hum of something finally beginning. He set a leather-bound folder on the table between us. His expression was softer now. Less lawyer, more witness. "This," he said, "is the amended, legally binding will your father submitted a year before his passing." I nodded, though my hands curled slightly in my lap. I reviewed it myself, he continued. He made me promise it would remain sealed unless you came forward with the code from the private folder. You did. That means this document now takes precedence. I reached for it slowly. My fingers brushed the soft leather, but I didn't open it yet. I assume Lorraine doesn't know this exists? I asked. She suspects something, he said with a hint of irony. But not this. I took a breath and opened it. Each page was crisp. The language was clinical. Asset distributions, trust transfers, legal authority. But halfway through, a single paragraph caught my eye. To my daughter, Clara Whitaker, I leave full legal and operational control of the Whitaker Annex for independent science and innovation, as well as all patents, intellectual property, and associated accounts listed in Appendix B. This decision is made not out of obligation, but recognition. She was not raised to take over. She was born ready to build her own future. A line beneath that. Your nature, not your role, is why you're chosen. I swallowed. Somewhere behind those words was the man I remembered. The one who used to stay up late with me while I glued LED circuits to cardboard. The one who once whispered, "Don't let them make you smaller, kiddo. You're not built for their boxes." Mr. Ellery flipped to the last page and pointed to a series of sealed envelopes. This one, he said, tapping the thickest, was meant to be read aloud, with everyone present. I stared at it. The thought of being in a room again with Lorraine and Damien made my jaw clench. But part of me needed it, needed them to hear what he really thought, needed them to understand that silence doesn't mean weakness, only restraint. And I was done restraining. I'll organize the reading, I said. Make sure everyone is there. Mr. Ellery nodded. He wanted it done at the main house, said it would matter more that way. Of course he did. The space where I was erased, now the place where I'd reappear. As I walked him to the door, he turned back. You know, he said, your father never told me much about his regrets, but I think this annex was more than a gift. I think it was an apology. I didn't answer. There was a stillness in me now. Not emptiness, not grief, a readiness. That evening, I sent 3 invitations. Formal, director, to Lorraine, to Damien, to Aunt Miriam, Dad's sister, long estranged from the rest. Let them all hear it. Let them see what he left behind. Not just the building or the patents, but the truth. Because this time, I wouldn't be sitting quietly. This time, the story was mine to tell. The room looked almost the same. Same chairs, same heavy table, same view of the withering garden through the window. But this time, I wasn't seated at the edge like an afterthought. I stood behind the head chair where Lorraine had positioned herself last time. Centered, controlled. She sat 2 seats to the right now, eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a tight line. Damien slouched beside her, arms crossed. He looked more confused than angry. Aunt Miriam had taken a seat across from me. She gave me a subtle nod, the kind of support that says, I'm not sure what's about to happen, but I'm here for it. Mr. Ellery stood between us, composed as ever. He placed the thick, sealed letter on the table. It bore Dad's unmistakable script. To be read in full, aloud, in the presence of Clara, Lorraine, Damien, and Miriam. Lorraine scoffed. This again? How many letters did your father leave hidden in drawers and toolboxes? This one, Mr. Ellery said calmly, was part of the official amended will. Clara met all conditions to unlock it. Her eyes cut to me. So this is your little revenge? Parade us in here so you can throw a tantrum with paperwork? I didn't answer. I just sat down slowly and gestured toward Mr. Ellery. He unfolded the letter. To the people who shared my name and my home, and to the one who inherited my silence. He began, reading in a measured voice. I write this not to divide further, but to finally speak the words I swallowed for too long. Lorraine shifted in her chair. Damien leaned forward. Aunt Miriam folded her hands neatly in her lap. To Lorraine. You are who you are. You see power in control, comfort in performance. I accepted that, even as it chipped away at the people I loved. Perhaps I should have done more. I watched you reshape my home into something colder, watched my daughter shrink to survive it. A sharp intake of breath from across the table. You said Clara was too quiet, too strange, but you never stayed long enough in a room to hear her speak. She didn't need your approval. She needed space. That's what I've given her, the space you kept taking away. Lorraine stood abruptly. This is outrageous. He was medicated. He didn't know what he was writing. Mr. Ellery didn't even blink. He continued. To Damien. I tried to be a father to you. I don't regret that. But you were told lies. That you were entitled to all of this because you stayed, because you smiled. That's not inheritance. That's theater. Damien's mouth opened, but he said nothing. His gaze dropped. To Clara? I saw what they did. I saw how you were erased, how your notebooks disappeared, how your birthday was always rescheduled. I failed you in those moments, but I watched you build a life anyway. You didn't shout. You didn't beg. You endured. The annex is yours. So is the research, the name, the future. Not because I owed you, but because you earned it long before any of them knew what you were capable of. The silence in the room cracked. To Miriam, thank you for always asking the questions no one else would. Aunt Miriam wiped one eye discreetly. This letter is not permission. It's truth, and it's too late to argue with it. The room was still. I looked at Lorraine. She wasn't angry. She was pale, stripped of the script. Damien just stared at the envelope like it might explode. I stood up, pushing my chair back gently. No one here has to like it, I said, voice calm, level. But this time, I'm not leaving quietly. No one followed me when I left the room. I walked out slowly, each footstep echoing on the marble floor like punctuation. Final. Measured. No slamming doors, no dramatic speeches, just distance, quiet and permanent. Behind me, Lorraine didn't protest. Her voice didn't rise. For once, she had nothing rehearsed to say. Mr. Ellery stayed behind to handle the formalities. Aunt Miriam walked beside me down the hallway in silence. When we reached the front door, she turned. He knew, she said simply. I nodded. And now they do too. Her eyes softened. I don't know what you'll do next, Clara. But whatever it is, make sure it's yours, not just what they tried to take from you. I held her gaze, then smiled faintly. It already is. We said goodbye without hugs, just understanding. I stepped outside into the wind, the house behind me, the one where I'd once curled up on the staircase with a flashlight and a science magazine, where I tiptoed through holidays pretending to be part of a family that never made space for me. It felt smaller now, like a stage after the curtain falls. I didn't take anything, not a keepsake, not a photo, not even the necklace I once left in the bathroom drawer when I was 15 and never saw again. It didn't belong to me anymore. Or maybe it never did. When I got back to the car, my phone buzzed. A message from Lorraine. You've made your point. Congratulations. Just don't come back here thinking you can change anything. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to understand what they did. I didn't even need their names to remember who I was. I just needed to stop asking for love from people who only knew how to give power. My father had failed me when it counted, but in the end, he gave me something more valuable than closure. He gave me the truth. He gave me the space to rebuild. And this time, I wasn't rebuilding in reaction to them. I was building in reflection of me. That night, I returned to the annex. No champagne, No celebration. Just the sound of my footsteps across polished concrete and the quiet whir of the main generator humming to life as the facility came online for the first time under my command. I stood in the central lab, the one that overlooked the garden Dad always dreamed of planting, and watched the wind shift through the empty field outside. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, not empty, not hollow, just real. I whispered the words out loud to myself. I don't need to be loved anymore. I need to be real. And for the first time, I believed it. Not as a shield, not as a wound, but as a door. One that only opens when you stop waiting for permission to walk through. The days that followed were quiet, but full. I lived alone in the small loft apartment attached to the annex, a space Dad had added just in case someone needed to stay overnight. He knew, even then. In the mornings, sunlight poured through the eastern glass wall of the lab, catching dust particles midair like glitter suspended in water. I'd sit with coffee in hand, barefoot on cool tile, and watch the light move across the floor like time made visible. There were no visitors, no one checking in, just me and the work. I started slowly. I reopened old documents Dad left on the cloud server. Ideas we had sketched out when I was 13 but never built. Inventions for clean water tech, low-cost solar kits for rural homes, simplified data loggers for school labs. They were crude, childlike, but they were full of heart. I smiled as I scrolled. One folder was labeled simply, Little Scientists. Inside, a grant proposal draft, a youth education initiative, a dream. To give quiet kids with loud ideas the tools to be heard. Dad's mission, in his own words. So I made it real. I called a friend from college who worked in community outreach. Then I reached out to a retired biology teacher I remembered from high school. Slowly, a team formed. People who believed in purpose over prestige. By spring, we hosted our first cohort. 12 students, ages 10 to 14. Most had never been in a lab before. Some barely spoke above a whisper. But when we gave them notebooks, replicas of the one Dad saved from my childhood, they opened like flowers in morning sun. One girl, Mia, came in every day wearing oversized headphones and refused to talk for the first week. But by the end of the program, she was explaining her soil acidity experiment to a room of adults with a kind of quiet fire I recognized instantly. I saw myself in her, and I realized something. Legacy isn't what's handed down, it's what you build quietly, and then give away. One afternoon, while organizing the annex library, I came across a cardboard box labeled Garage Stuff, CW. Inside, my childhood microscope, a crumpled drawing of a solar-powered bee tracker, a photo of me, age 9, grinning wildly in front of my first failed science project. Taped to the back of the frame was a note, in Dad's handwriting. You were always the spark. I just tried to protect the flame. I didn't cry. I just sat there, holding the frame, and let the silence wrap around me. There was no applause in this work, no headlines, no approval, just 12 kids in oversized lab coats, just a building full of tools and possibilities, just the hum of something that had once been buried, now beating again, steady and strong. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't inherited his wealth. I'd inherited his vision. And finally, it was mine to give. The sun rose earlier now. Summer stretched over the annex like a soft quilt, warming the glass panels, stirring the wildflowers planted by the students along the perimeter. The lab buzzed gently with activity, the quiet kind. Laughter, the faint hum of data processing, the tap of keys, the occasional sound of a child asking, "What happens if I do this?" Peace doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes slowly. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like knowing you no longer need to prove yourself to people who stopped looking a long time ago. One evening, I walked the perimeter path Dad used to pace when he was thinking. The garden we started as a blueprint was now growing for real. Corn sprouting in rows, soil sensors blinking softly. The kids had built a small windmill from old bicycle parts. It barely spun, but they were proud. I sat on the bench under the old pine tree. This was where I used to hide when I was little, when the voices inside the house were sharp and the air too tight to breathe. Now the air smelled of mint and damp wood. My chest didn't ache anymore. Sometimes I still think about them. Lorraine, Damien, my father. I haven't heard from them since the letter was read. No lawsuits, no threats, just silence. And I don't miss them. What I miss is the version of me that waited, that watched, that hoped. But she's gone now, not with anger, but grace. The annex is thriving. We've just been approved for a second program, outreach to underfunded rural schools. Next year, we'll double our student count. In my office, beside the window that catches the morning light just right, I keep the old photo of me and Dad. He's laughing, really laughing, holding a screwdriver and pointing at the broken project we just ruined together. In the bottom corner, he scribbled in marker, "You don't have to fix it, just keep building." I live by that now. One mistake doesn't define a person. One betrayal doesn't define a life. We build anyway, and maybe we build better because of it. As I stood up from the bench, the wind stirred, light but certain. It rustled the grass, bent the tall sunflowers, swept through the open windows of the annex like a whisper. I thought about all the things he didn't leave me. No family name carved in stone, no grand mansion, no speech declaring I belonged. And yet, I had everything I needed, the space, the tools, the chance to make something different, something mine. Back inside, the kids had pinned quotes on the lab wall, little affirmations from their journals. One caught my eye. "Some relationships are roots, others are weight." I smiled. Maybe Dad didn't leave me love in the way I once begged for. But he left me something better. He left me room to grow, and that, I've learned, is more than enough.